Sydney's water supply. That verdict was a savage blow to Croatian Australians whose dream of an independent homeland within the state of Yugoslavia is being so sorely tested once again this week. For 3 decades, these fiercely nationalistic people have used Australia as a staging post to take the fight to Belgrade. But the conviction of the Croatian Six suggested they were at war with their host country too, and the community's copybook was badly blotted. It's ironic that in this, perhaps Croatia's darkest hour, their cries of innocence might finally be vindicated. Chris Masters' story begins with some of the Croatian Six recounting evidence they gave at their trial. As you'll see, his investigation turned up a lot of other vital evidence that never made it into court.
One grabbed me by hair. I have long hair like now. Pulled my head the back side. When it hurt me, I said, one policeman put a pistol on my mouth and said, shoot the bloody bastard.
I was just in my swimming pants. They bashed me with the butts of their pistols, you know. And I keep asking them, keep screaming, you know. What's this all about? Why they torture me like an animal? I got a right to know why I'm here, you know.
We are preparing ourselves to celebrate birthday on the Saturday of my daughter. And what's happened that night, it was actually night that I was arrested, and from that point I did not see my family after, did not come home for 7 years.
The people talking are all victims of a form of political persecution. They are all veterans in the war for independence of their homeland, a struggle that at this very moment has moved to the brink of civil war. They will all tell you they have fought to be free of totalitarian oppression. Every one of them was born in Yugoslavia, or more specifically, Croatia. But the horror stories they speak of did not occur in Yugoslavia or Croatia. The suffering in this story is the result of the frailty and treachery of the justice system here in Australia.
I could not believe it. That can happen in a democracy. I was believing it. I could not believe in my wild dream. No.
This is a story about spying and sabotage, about brutality and betrayal right here on our own doorstep. The case we'll focus on is one well known in Australian legal history, the Croatian Six case. But as we'll show, this famous case was flawed from the very start. The majority of these men were convicted largely on a series of unsigned confessions and the crucial evidence of a central witness. But as you'll see, the central witness had every reason to lie, and by his own admission did just that. Even so, on this tainted evidence, the 6 men were pronounced guilty, and in a sense, so too were 200,000 Croatian Australians.
It was probably the most damning event in public life in Australia as far as the Croat community was concerned, most damning for a very long time. Up to that point in time, the Croat community could say, rightfully so, that never was an act of terrorism ascribed to Croats been proved as such.
The man at the heart of this most damning event disappeared into Yugoslavia 10 years ago. And there, 2 months ago, he was discovered by our cameras. What we also discovered was that Vico Verkes, the man accepted by the Australian courts as a partner in a Croatian bomb plot, turned out to be a very loyal servant of Croatia's enemy.
Were you thanked for the work you had done in helping to put those men in jail by the Yugoslav consulate?
No, well, they say on the front police, well, we thank you very much for you done it, and we will look after you now. You can go in Yugoslavia anytime you want. Will be best for you, and we will give you some money, and we'll look after you.
To Australians in the 1960s and 1970s, the very word Croatian was close to a synonym for fascism and terrorism. The struggle for an independent Croatia had somehow trespassed into the pages of Australian history. A spate of bombings of various Yugoslav agencies in Sydney and Melbourne managed to rattle the windows in far-off Belgrade, as well as frighten the life out of the Australian public.
I think since the war there have been something like 18 bombings in Australia involving Yugoslavs directed against Yugoslav government property. And there were a lot of instances of this sort. And of course that's a very violent breaking of the law and something which Australian society couldn't tolerate, quite rightly.
In the 60s and 70s, Australia's third largest migrant community was made up of people from the nation we now know as Yugoslavia. The majority were from Croatia, and to put it bluntly, the Croatians were a nuisance. Bring your music and folk dancing, we said, but don't bring your politics. The price of freedom in this new land was that the feuding and squabbles be left behind.
Well, that would have been ideal, but people don't leave their squabbles behind and they bring their political ideas with them. And of course some of them had fought and suffered violently under the Tito regime, and they weren't going to forget it just because they'd come to a new and a more relaxed liberal country like democratic Australia.
We are people, which is to say we are not something that you can fashion. We are not potatoes you can put on a shelf and leave there. We are normal people. We have various concerns. We're a package deal.
There was growing suspicion among many Croatian Australians that at least some of the trouble blamed on the Croatians was as likely the work of the Serbian-dominated Yugoslav government.
The Yugoslav government, for example, spent vast amounts of money, impossible to understand by anybody who is not part of that system, on following various social clubs, infiltrating various sporting clubs. It's absolutely impossible to understand. It's irrational, obsessive, yes.
The province of Bosnia-Herzegovina has something of a split personality. There is an uneasy sharing of the landscape between a great many Croats and an even larger number of Serbs. A young man who would later find his way to the centre of Australia's most famous Croatian terrorist plot began the journey from a village near here. And although representing himself in Australia as Croatian, he was in fact a Serb. Sometime in the mid-70s, Vitomir Masimovic, as he was formerly known, became Viko Verkez, a name likely to be more acceptable to Croatian Australians.